sad. She was visiting from Atlanta, Georgia. She'd come spend the summer with her dad, and I thought she was very pretty. We would kiss and hold hands every night by the coffee. Her body was happy in the afternoons by the public swimming pool. Sweet evening breeze blows around my thoughts and memories as I lie here and drink my tea. I just listen, a sweet evening breeze.
Sweet evening breeze. My name is Julie Green. Recently, I fled the USA and came to Uruguay, a small country in South America. I often joke that I'm an escapee from the mental ward. What you are about to hear is only a part of my long and complicated story. I spent my childhood in Massachusetts, USA, and lived most of my life there. I am not only an electroshock survivor, but I survived the death of my beloved partner, Joseph Coleman Casey. After he died, I joined his family and reminisced about the things we loved about him. We spoke of his beard and what a sloppy eater he was. He loved God, all children, and the many dogs that crossed his path. He maintained that the spark of life that shined in those twinkly and sad Irish eyes of his. When misfortune came his way, he never asked, "Why me?" but instead, "Why not me?" Everyone loved Joe's gruff voice. It wasn't gravelly, harsh, hoarse, nor in any way annoying. He spoke definitively. He was even-tempered like my father, and I laugh now, wondering if I chose my mate deliberately based on just that. We had met in the smoking room of a hospital psychiatric ward Thanksgiving weekend in 1986. We were both 28 years old. Joe introduced me to the music he loved: Fleetwood Mac, Tom Petty, the Cars, the Doors. I recall years later, when CDs came out, I bought my very first one, John Mellencamp's album, Human Wheels. Joe loved it right away. Oftentimes, we sat together in his van, sipped on iced coffee, and chatted away until we heard the song, Sweet Evening Breeze. Our conversation stopped right then as we listened in awe. The song tells the tale of two passionate lovers who separate, then meet up later in life. But now, life has changed. Once and only once I heard Joe sing. He didn't want anyone to know. I caught him at it, though. I caught him singing along with John Mellencamp. I dropped everything I was thinking about. I turned and stared. Immediately, he stopped. I wanted to say, "Joe, was that you?" But I said nothing, in case it was only the wind. His singing voice had a nearly operatic quality. He was a tenor. That was all before the shock treatments. In winter and spring of 1996, I was inpatient at McLean Hospital, the place made famous by Susanna Cation's Girl Interrupted. I was told that the most efficient, most effective, and fastest way to get over depression was to submit to shock treatments. I said no as firmly and clearly as I could. No! Then the unit staff showed me a videotape about shock treatments. I wasn't encouraged to question other patients who had had this done. I was told if I didn't agree to this, I'd be depressed forever. The procedure was first done while I was inpatient, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then I was allowed to have them done outpatient. Once, about a minute before the anesthesiologist knocked me out, the doctor who did the shock, Dr. Michael Henry, asked me, "Is it okay if we do bilateral?" Bilateral means I was given 2 jolts of electricity, one on each side of my head, instead of just 1 jolt. I signed no papers, nor was told of the risks. I only wanted it over with. I had refrained from eating or drinking prior to the shock. This was so I wouldn't aspirate my own puke should I vomit from the anesthesia. These so-called treatments are done while the patient is fully dressed. The jolt of electricity causes a seizure, and that somehow is supposed to do some good. Shortly after, the patient wakes up. They won't admit how many patients don't ever wake up at all. Once, I woke up with a Johnny on and discovered the staff had removed my clothes while I was unconscious. They told me the seizure had caused me to lose bladder control. I went home carrying a bag full of wet clothing. Neither Joe nor my parents trusted this procedure. I argued for it, saying, "Oh, this is the new way, don't you see? I'll do anything to feel better, even this." I believed that this was the great technology that was going to save the world from crippling depression. My dad, a former president of the National Alliance for Mental Illness, said, "Julie, maybe being in the hospital so much is making you more depressed. Have you considered that?" But I would hear none of that. My dad was an amazing scientist and had full understanding of what made sense and what was just plain illogical. He didn't think destroying brain cells was going to cure anything. To my dad, who was suffering from cancer at that time, it only made sense to eradicate what didn't belong there. Not my precious brain. The cancer in him continued to spread. My parents became more and more preoccupied with his health. That was how Joe got assigned to the dreadful chauffeur task as designated driver to and from the shock treatments. He told me later on he felt like he was driving me to the guillotine. It was one thing taking me to that place. It was another bringing me home afterward. Joe watched in horror as I got progressively worse and worse and worse. I began to lose awareness of what was real and what wasn't. I felt like I was in a foggy dream. One day, I took my dog Tiger for a walk. She was a Sheltie. We took our usual route. Suddenly, I had no clue where I was. Could this be my street? What about this one? I didn't know. Where am I? How did I make it home that day? I don't know. But I did come back, and I removed one of Tiger's collars, and without even realizing it, threw it into the trash. I tried to take a shower, but I had no idea how. Getting my clothing on and off seemed way too complicated. Hours passed. When Tiger asked to go out again, I called Joe in desperation. Honey, can you come over and walk with me? I begged him. I can't be alone anymore. It was a hot and dry evening. My street was torn up from road construction. The three of us slowly made our way down that gravelly mess. I held tightly onto Tiger's leash. The breeze kicked up the dust all around us, but we kept on together. I knew just how hard it was for Joe to wheel his manual wheelchair over my torn-up road that evening. I can almost hear the words, "Why not me?" I recall the sound of those rolling wheels, my human footsteps, and my four-legged dog, the three of us now struggling for our lives. What had happened to Jojo and Jules and the Sheltie named Tiger? My ability to do anything at all at that point only worsened as the shock treatments continued. It was time for the next shock. But Joe had other ideas. When shock doc, Dr. Michael Henry, phoned me that morning, I wasn't able to converse at all. So, feeling helpless and frightened, I handed the phone to Joe. His gruff voice was as firm as I'd ever heard it. "No," he said. Then he explained, "Doc, it's not depression. Julie's becoming more confused." Dr. Henry replied, "Then bring her in for another treatment." Joe disagreed, but his gruff voice went unheard. After the next treatment, I was rendered even more incapable. They put me in the hospital again. At that point, my new psychiatrist, Dr. Montgomery Brower, told me they were finally stopping the shock treatments. I was released after a few days and told to go to a day program. I had no choice. I knew something was terribly wrong, but I couldn't figure it out. Why couldn't I think straight anymore? But I was like the fourth son at Passover who knows so little he cannot even ask a question. My reality base was just plain gone. I pleaded with the day program staff, saying again and again, "Something's wrong." Then the doctors told me I was attention-seeking. Dr. Brower told me, "Julie, you worry too much and feel things too deeply." He told me the confusion was a dissociative episode. Dissociative episode. I repeated the words back to him like that was biblical truth. I assumed he was right. And this was my new problem. Personality disorder. They had me meet with Dr. John Gunderson, McLean's borderline guru. Looking back, if anyone had personality problems, surely it was Gunderson. I was told that since I had a personality disorder, I suffered from multiple suicide attempts, attention-seeking behavior, and cutting. That wasn't true, though. But when I heard borderline, I changed. My life became reframed to fit within those parameters, even though the fit wasn't right. In fact, I began to cut. I wondered if the rest of my life was going to be like this. I felt all alone. The hospital personnel noticed my confusion wasn't going away. They held a family meeting led by Dr. Baldessarini. I met with him myself first, then my entire treatment team and my parents. I remember just how sick my dad looked at that meeting. I recall my mother's words, "It's the shock treatments that ruined our daughter, isn't it?" There were so many doctors in that room, she didn't know which one to confront. Dr. Baldessarini was quick to respond with a dismissive gesture. "Oh no, he said. That's not possible. Joe told me he was frustrated and stressed out and increasingly helpless to do anything. My confused state wasn't improving. Months passed. By Christmas, he too had changed, becoming preoccupied and distant. Then I had to go live in one of McLean's resident homes, the budget one they had for welfare cases, called Hall Mercer. I tried so hard to get anyone to listen. Even asking earned me more accusations of attention-seeking behavior. Meanwhile, Joe told me his own psychiatrist, Dr. White, whom he had been seeing for many years, had suddenly disappeared. I knew there was some scandal, but we never found out for sure. Joe felt devastated, but I was too confused to be much help. He stayed with his parents for a while. I didn't see Joe much after that for a long time, until he too was hospitalized. The two of us were an awful mess. One day, Joe put his arm around me and begged me not to cry while we listened to John Mellencamp's sad song, Sweet Evening Breeze, over and over. I leaned my head against his chest while he stroked my hair, calling me Jules, telling me over and over that everything would somehow work out. My new therapist, Missy Myers, was a resident psychiatrist willing to take me on for therapy. They had told her that I had a severe personality disorder. Someone in administration was pushing hard to have me transferred to a state hospital. I heard their words over and over, long-term hospitalization. Folks, that was how McLean Hospital tried to cover up what they had done, to ensure that I wouldn't figure out the truth. I know now, and I'm sure they knew then, that the confusion I was experiencing was a direct result of damage from shock treatments. I didn't have a brand new diagnosis, and I wasn't dissociating. But the damage from shock treatment was the damage from shock treatments permanent? Would I ever be the same? As far as anyone knew, I was of no further use to society, nor could I ever live on my own again. I made plans to kill myself. I didn't want to be locked up in a state hospital for the rest of my life. I credit Dr. Myers for getting me completely out of the McLean system, but it's sad that she informed my family that I had a bogus personality disorder. I spent 3 weeks in a community hospital while my fate was up in the air. I was released to a respite facility. I spent 3 weeks there. I noticed the confusion was improving. Then I tried to live at my apartment again. Months later, on my 40th birthday, a cold morning in January 1998, the devastating effects of shock had finally blown away like a gust of wind. After a year and a half, I was free. I took up creative writing. I wrote my first novel. I went back to college and I was fine. My next therapist said she saw no evidence of a personality disorder. I graduated from Emerson College with high honors in the summer of 2003. On August 19th, a month later, Joe collapsed in his elevator and died. At his funeral, we sang Amazing Grace. Somehow, in the sweet evening breeze, I can still hear his gruff voice. I can see clearly his grin under his beard. He appeared to me in a dream I had, assuring me the food in heaven was terrific. He invited me to join him, but I have promises to keep. I have a mission here on earth, a mission for Joe and for all of us. These large, rich, and powerful hospitals in USA routinely cover up their grave errors. by inventing bogus diagnoses to explain the consequences of their crimes. When they can't patch up what they've done, they do what's most convenient. We get put away. Taxpayers will pay for it as they pay billions in disability payments to more and more patients who've been damaged by those institutions that claim to cure. When will this insanity stop? After I finished graduate school in 2009, I became more aware. I used writing and blogging to speak out against injustice. For this, I was considered a nuisance and later a threat. They even called me dangerous. I was illegally taken from my home many times. I up again. My home was illegally searched. I was accused of crimes I had never committed nor ever planned to commit. We're granted freedom of speech in USA, but those of us who blow the whistle on institutions are denied constitutional rights. Isn't it all surprising that they threatened again to put me in a state hospital? I'm very lucky that I got out of their grasp and left the USA when I did. Today, I dream of the freeing of all enslaved people, of the obliteration of psychiatric diagnosis. I dream of knocking down the walls, real and invisible, of segregation and bigotry. I dream of a society that embraces all variety of human experience. Let not more human being ever be sent to a locked facility, nor forced to undergo barbaric procedures. I dream of the day they stop tossing out people like me. Not one human being is worthless. I believe this change will happen and that these powerful institutions will fall. But we must continue to demand, let my people go. I no longer get depressed. I live a happy and productive life. What they told me was a permanent disorder requiring heavy-duty therapy and even shock treatments was all a lie. At 57 years old, I'm delighted to be free of any form of mental health treatment. I am grateful to the people of Hawaii who have been unconditionally welcoming to me. I'll end with a quote taken from John Mellencamp's Sweet Evening Breeze. I was loud and a little sad. She was visiting from Atlanta, Georgia. She had come to spend the summer with her dad. I thought she was very pretty. We would kiss and hold hands every night by the football field. Sweet evening breeze blows around my thoughts.
I was loud and a little sad. She was visiting from Atlanta, Georgia. She had come to spend the summer with her dad. And I thought she was very pretty. We would kiss and hold hands every night by the football field. Her body was tan from the afternoons by the public swimming pool. Sweet evening breeze blows around my thoughts and memories as I lie here and drink my tea. I just listen. A sweet evening breeze. coffee shop in a big hotel down in Austin, Texas. She had cut her long hair off and replaced it with blue eyes of sadness. Still acted like we were kids. And she told me that she had to marry, and she asked me if I did. Still remember the sweet evening breeze blows around my thoughts and memories. As I lie here today and drink my tea, I can still see sweet evening breeze. Days of old are very, very ridiculous for me to see. When I think about the real gone story, how time holds the winning hand. I can tell by the lines on our faces how the young can understand. When they look at me, they look at themselves. Sweet evening breeze blows around my thoughts and memories as I lie here today and drink my tea. I can still see